had to apply to get access?
Yes, I will talk about that. Yes, it is on this slide. Yes. So at Oak Ridge National Lab, or the Oak Ridge Leadership Facility, we have like three main buckets of our mission, our philosophy. So it's a capability based on high performance computing. We have open science and scientific publications, as well as strategic partnerships that mutually benefit ORNL. So as I mentioned before, we are an Oscar Leadership Computing Facility. We serve compute all over the world, not limited to anybody just in the United States. We have users everywhere. It's designed to serve tens of users with very large jobs and prioritizing those large jobs over small ones. And we are a Linux environment, so we don't have any Windows, we don't have any email, wireless, laptop printers, none of that. And we support lots of data transfer with our big systems. So all of our other stuff is managed by, like our laptop and stuff are managed by a whole different department at Oak Ridge, but just specifically for HPC, that's all we provide. To answer your question, if you have a project proposal, it goes to the Resource Utilization Council. So let's say you have some type of big brain idea that you say is going to change the world, and you, for some reason, need a high amount of computational power to conduct your experiment. So what you would do is you would submit your proposal to the Resource Utilization Council, and they will analyze it to see, do you really need the computational power, or deem you worthy? I don't know how. If you are deemed worthy by the government gods, then your time is
use as a precious resource.
Yes, the best use of our precious resources, correct. So if they decide that your project proposal is approved, then you will be allocated time on the supercomputers. Time is free as long as you publish your results. It is a mutually beneficial relationship between ORNL and our users. And we also allow users to bring their own code. Now, in the back of your mind, you might be thinking, wow, you just let users bring arbitrary code? Yep. Sure do. Yep. So, and I will also talk about that as one of our challenges that we have in high performance computing. And as I mentioned before, it is a strategic partnership where we have many different programs. It's specifically called the Strategic Partnership Program. Like I said, a lot of acronyms, and they have their own allocation body. So I would also like to mention that we also have other partnerships with other government agencies, such as the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA. And we also have a partnership with the Air Force Weather. So they have their own systems and their own needs if your project is large enough. So we also support those two government agencies as well. And it's also not limited to just government. We also work with private industry. A fun fact, Oak Ridge is credited in Kung Fu Panda 2. They use, I can't remember if they use Jaguar or if they use Titan. I want to say it was it's probably, I think it was Titan, I think, yeah, to do some of the rendering for some of the frames in Kung Fu Panda 2. So Oak Ridge did a partnership with DreamWorks.
So since that was published, was it free?
Yes, I believe so. Oh yeah. You know what? I should probably figure that out. But yeah, like I said, we do partnerships with just about anybody and everybody. We are not just limited to government entities. So that's kind of the cool thing about Oak Ridge. So these are just some of the major science initiatives and technologies that we support. So material and chemical processes, neutron sciences, they have their own division in their own building, computing and data analytics, nuclear, isotope, R&D production, biological and environmental systems, isotope, research and development and production, national security, and then we also have energy systems. But honestly, it's not even just limited to this. We do just about everything and anything. And if we don't do it and you bring that idea to it, we probably will do it. So the possibilities are endless. I mean, you can do just about any type of science, technology. I mean, we were instrumental in COVID-19 research. They were doing Earth modeling. We had some people that were doing like supernova research. I mean, we do just about everything and anything. So the working at a national lab is actually really cool because you get to meet a lot of different people and even a lot of the different sciences. Now, like I said, I am no scientist by any means, so it's really cool to get to talk to and learn what other science people are doing at the lab. So it's really cool. All right, so now I am going to go into what exactly is high performance computing. So in a nutshell, high performance computing is the ability to process data and perform complex calculations at very high speeds. So I put an example up here. So let's say you have a laptop that has a 3 gigahertz processor that can do about 3 billion calculations per second, which is way more than the human brain can ever analyze. You have high performance computers that can even give you quadrillions, and we have even reached the quintillions of operations per second. And it is also measured in floating point operations per second, which are also known as flops. So I like to show this diagram to show the process of what we have been able to accomplish at Oak Ridge National Lab. So we have our projects that are named like OLCF dash and then a number. So Jaguar was OLCF2, where it performed at 2.3 petaflops, and it was a multi-core CPU, and it was at 7 megawatts in 2009. And then we moved on to Titan in 2012 that went from 2.3 petaflops to 27 petaflops. So we've pretty much gone up a power every machine that we've had over like a 5 or 6 year time span. And it was a hybrid GPU CPU and performed at 9 megawatts of power. And then we went from 27 petaflops to 200 petaflops, also a hybrid GPU CPU machine at 13 megawatts. And finally, we have the behemoth. We have Frontier, which is the world's first exascale supercomputer in the world. It is the number 1 on the top 500. It is number 2 on the green 500, only to be beat by its test system. So, and there are 1,000 petaflops in 1 exaflop, and it actually has a theoretical peak now of 2 exaflops. So combined with Summit and Frontier at Oak Ridge National Lab, we can provide 2.2 quintillion floating point operations per second. That is a lot of computational power. So even if you look at between the last 5 years from 2017 up to, well, actually, I should say 2023, the leaps that was made from 200 petaflops, and within 5 years, we broke exascale. So it is an amazing feat, and you have to thank our vendors and the people that worked at the lab to help make that possible. So we've also had, Titan was number 1, Summit was number 1. Was Jaguar number 1 too?
We've always held the title.
We've always held the title.
A week or 2 later, someone else did.
Right. So, but we're
usually, it's Fugaku stalled from Summit for a while.
yeah. But luckily, Frontier is still on top as of, I think as of October. I think they redid the benchmarks for the top 500.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I also mentioned it
It's
has,
not at full potential.
yeah, still not at its fullest potential. So it has a theoretical peak. So the difference between a theoretical peak and actual peak is theoretically, with all of the hardware and everything combined with all the GPUs and the CPUs, theoretically, it can perform at 2 exaflops, but its actual performed numbers is 1.102 exaflops. So it's still amazing. And I think, oh, okay. But
Is curious, is that a matter of efficiency, or is it just parts of it?
Benchmark.
Benchmarking, it has a couple of reasons why it possibly does not perform at its full performance, but it's a couple of reasons why.
And also all these are generated via WinPack benchmark. So
Yes.
estimating that from hardware, especially with hardware where Frontier is one of the first large systems with that hardware, is a little tricky. But we have, if you really want to know, there was a press release a few weeks ago, and I can't remember what else in it, so I can't remember what all I can actually say. But there are, yeah, it's got a bottleneck that's going away.
Yes, yes, it does. So now the nitty gritty, HPC versus industry. All right. So I think for the purposes of understanding what exactly is high performance computing, I like to bring up this diagram just to explain the architecture. So a lot of times in industry, you only have like maybe a few servers and then you have one system and then that's pretty much it. Well, in HPC, we have what are called clusters, and those clusters have several different nodes. So you have login nodes, management nodes, execution nodes, data transfer nodes, and compute nodes. So cross over here really quick, I think, so I can explain this to you. So I'm just gonna go over exactly what this diagram is saying. So when it comes to your home institution, that is the user. And the user will usually log into a login node. This is the only thing that they have access to. Anything beyond this barrier is facility managed. So they have their job and they have their code and they want to run it. So from one, they log into their login node. And then from there, the user submits their compute job, or they'll usually have like a batch script that'll go through here, and it will be dropped into the queue in the resource manager program using a submission utility. And then once it goes from the scheduler, then it goes to the job queue. And the scheduler program provides execution scheduling constraints to the resource manager. So then in accordance with the schedule constraints, you know, like I said, job queue would prioritize different jobs, which ones should be run first, whatever it decides to do. Then it goes over here and the research manager program sends the job to the compute node, to the execution node. And then from here, what's actually doing the computation is the compute node. So once your compute node runs your code, and let's say you want your data back, then it goes to the data transfer nodes, and then it can go back to the home institution, and that's how they get their data back from when they run their jobs. So with our security model, you can think of it as we have an outer layer, and then we also have an inner layer. So we have strong boundary protections, which is this dotted red line that we have here. So basically we control what goes in and what comes out. We have very strong authenticators. So that's another thing too that comes with, not only are we selective in what projects can be run, but we're also very, very, very good about providing strong authenticators. So two-factor authentication, and then strong identity proofing. So there's a long process, well, long, but a strenuous process that you can go through when it comes to proving, and we have to make sure that you are who you say you are. So we are very selective. We make sure that you are who you say you are. And like I said, things go through like export control, and you get to talk about your proposal, who's allowed on your project, who isn't. So we do a lot of very strong identity proofing, and we also provide strong authenticators. And then once we actually get into the inner layer, again, the user only goes to here, and everything else is provided right here. So I mentioned, again, the different type of nodes. We control this layer here. And then we have cross submission through like the various queues based on what the user will submit to the job queue. And there is a wide discretion to share data and your code. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that, where it is truly the user's responsibility on how they share their data. So I will leave it at that. I said a lot of words. Does anybody have any questions so far?
So what is cross submission? Oh, that was, yeah, exactly. I'm thinking in context, that's where basically you have a job, let's say it's running on the frontier. I'm guessing that's where you would like move something to another compute resource or
Yeah.
being transferred.
Yeah.
Also be like a resource allocation scheduler.
Yeah, pretty much.
The term can be real messy. But there are
Fair.
ways.
Sounds like kind of workflow stuff, but I just was curious.
Got you. So, as a analogy, this is something that my boss came up with, and I kind of like it, where you can think of the facility managers as, where does
HPS diagram?
It is not in this diagram. Yeah,
What is HP?
it is our storage, I forgot exactly what it stands for.
High-
High performance
Yeah, storage.
storage system. Yes, so HPSS is not on the diagram.
It would be just wired directly into all of the data transfer and compute nodes and nothing else.
You still have data movers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, data transfer.
Data gravity's a thing, man.
Data gravity?
The idea that there's a real cost to moving large amounts of data around.
It's easier to move your compute than it is to move your data.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So the compute moves toward the data.
So like,
Never underestimate the throughput of station wagon full of tapes.
never underestimate the security of the station wagon full of tapes. Yeah.
Thanks, Earl.
but yeah, so like I said, you can think of us as like sheriffs and deputies. So at the red dots, you can think of us as like where we have our authorization, our firewall rules, and our schedule policy. And then you could think of the users as the deputies. So as sheriffs, we can protect you, and we're making sure that we also maintain the integrity, confidentiality, and accessibility of your data or the, you know, the CIA triad. But the users also have a responsibility for security. So you have to make sure there's correctness of your code, input sanitization in whatever you decide to submit, and then also allowing who has access to your project. So there is still a security responsibility on the user. We can only protect you so much. So there's also a very large user responsibility when it comes to security. So what motivates an HPC adversary? There are several reasons. I already know why you're laughing. Pretty much cryptocurrency mining. Of course, I mean, we provide so much computational power. I mean, of course, you would want to profit off of government resources and use all of our tax dollars to do your cryptocurrency mining for your own personal benefit. The answer is no, don't do that. If you have access to our systems and you do that, you will be banned. You might go to jail. So I do not suggest that you don't even ask. Okay. The answer is no.
Well, I have to ask, has anybody done the math on what could be generated if somebody did that?
That is a great question, and I have no idea. And I don't.
I know someone has, and the math was interesting.
Oh, really? Well, I'm interested.
You and I both know the person who did. They didn't do it, but they did the math.
They did the math.
What if a run eventually happens from that might be under a lawsuit?
It's gonna be a no.
Bring your own hardware.
Yeah, it's gonna be a no. Yeah. So like that's a really big reason as to why people would want to get access to a high performance computer. Ransomware and holding data hostage. So like I said, we are a target because we are a government entity, and that is a big reason why people would want to get access to our systems. Espionage, potential secret stealing, defacement, political motivations, system sabotage. And I think this next bullet is probably the most important one, which is sowing mistrust in the scientific community. I mean, our whole entire mission is to support groundbreaking science. So if an adversary or a hacker, anybody gets into anybody's scientific data and they somehow manipulate it, or they release it too early, or they make incorrect conclusions, that can sow a lot of mistrust, not only in the scientific community, but in ORNL. So, and national labs probably as a whole, because they come to us to provide them with the ability to run all of their simulations and their projects. And if somebody can take their data and manipulate it and people come to incorrect conclusions, then that sows a lot of mistrust in the scientific community. And of course, like I said, planting evidence. And as I mentioned, integrity, not necessarily confidentiality, is more important for open research. So open research is basically research that is meant to be shared with the entire community. It's meant to be shared with the world. So confidentiality is not as big as a deal, but integrity definitely is, because these numbers are meant to prove something, be innovative, be correct. So that's why you want to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the users that bring their data. So how are we different? So performance is justifiably important in high performance computing, but it can definitely be sacrificed in enterprise settings. So balancing performance and security is more difficult than in enterprise. And honestly, it's even different across like different government entities as well. So there might be certain things, certain guidelines, certain benchmarks that are provided to us that we might not necessarily be able to do. So, or we might not be able to do them in the way that they ask us to, and we always have to find alternative methods. So it's not that we don't meet the nature of these benchmarks, such as NIST 853 controls. We just have to find an alternative way to do it, because let's say you want to run some type of Linux utility, but if it has like a 20% performance hit, it's going to be a no. You know, imagine you're having the fastest supercomputer in the world, and you have your simulations that, realistically speaking, you know, I mean, it might take weeks, shoot, maybe even months to run it on a regular system, where they come to us to be able to run it in minutes, seconds, days, and it has a huge performance hit, then that's going to be a no. So we're going to have to find alternative ways and alternative methods to still meet the nature of certain benchmarks, but still have security and have performance in mind. Bespoke HPC systems are both complex and seldom tested by security researchers. So vulnerabilities may be easier to find in internal red teams and less likely to be exploited. So our HPC systems are extremely custom, and it is not just like we just take a package from Linux and then we just apply it to the computer and that's it. It has its own very custom software stacks. It's specially built for the purpose of performance and to be able to support science. So a lot of the times there might be vulnerabilities that aren't going to be able to be found because of how specific our systems are. So a lot of the times we have internal red teams, or we're partnered with any other vulnerability people to help us to triage and find vulnerabilities. And also we'll talk about some that was discovered by internal red teams at ORNL, which was actually really cool. Vulnerabilities may have a different effect or a risk level. So we have to do our own risk assessments to determine the severity of a vulnerability. So we can't just go to Red Hat or SUSE and they label a vulnerability. I mean, it's the Common Vulnerability Severity Score, CVSS. I'm pretty sure that's the exact acronym for
I'm
that.
not sure what the S's stand for right now, because I'm doubting myself.
I'm
I
pretty
think
sure
it's
it's
Common Vulnerability Scoring System.
scoring system. There we go. That sounds right. Zero, right. So it goes from a scale of 0 or 1 to 10. And let's say they blanket the vulnerability to say, oh, this is a 9.8. This is something you need to mitigate or patch right now. Well, for us, based on how our architecture is, it might not necessarily be a 9.8. It might be a 6. It might be a 7, or it might not really even be an issue at all for us, just based off of our architecture and one, the amount of users and the users that we already allow that have gone through this process, this strong vetting, this strong identity proofing, strong authenticators, where it might not affect us as much as private industry. So, but also on the flip side as well, it can also have the opposite effect where it might affect us more than what it would in private industry. So the scale can tip and it depends. So every vulnerability that comes through, we definitely have to do an assessment to make sure that it affects us in the way that it says it does. And if it doesn't, then we put out our assessments and then we communicate that with the rest of our team or the people that it affects.
Dumb question. So
No dumb question.
0 day comes out. Is it possible to ever shut down the supercomputer?
That's a good question.
Well, no, because you're saying it can affect you differently, which
It
makes
can.
a lot of sense, but also is there just, we're shutting it down right now?
It would have to be extremely severe for that to happen, but I will never say never.
Okay.
Let's
But it hasn't happened, at least not public.
Yeah, I've never seen
We would do.
that. So, yeah,
we do
because you've been at the lab.
adversary.
16 years,
16
I've
years.
never seen.
Yeah, never seen
A little patch.
As in-
Because that takes systems to patch, but never take everything down.
Yeah.
What about not a vulnerability, but a actual attack? You
Oh,
have to
well,
take
that's-
things down.
different.
Well, that's different. Oh, now that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we go into the assessment of, has our system been infiltrated? And go through that whole process like that's a whole different thing versus a vulnerability coming out and saying that, it's a 9.8 and you need to patch right now versus, oh, no, there's somebody that's actually on here, so that's two different completely stories, but it is plausible. Which one was that? Industry standard tools that work well for enterprise don't necessarily map well to HPC. So I kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier about security benchmarking have to be custom fit for our needs. So like I said, even across different government entities where performance is really not an issue, like maybe at the DoD where they apply sticks, well, necessarily we can't apply them one-to-one because we have a completely different architecture and performance is more important to us. So we have to go through each benchmark. And like I said, NIST 853, go through each of those one by one and assess what makes sense, what can we apply, how do we apply it, and what we're able to do with it. So we can't just take something off the internet and say, oh yeah, these benchmarks are supposed to secure our system and then just put it on there. We have to do very custom HPC benchmarking for that. System administrators of HPC systems are very knowledgeable, and system staff are a great resource of knowledge. This is an
Yes. That's what you said.
We found a post sales guy in the room.
So like the HPC is definitely a niche, and it's not something that they don't really teach that in school, and it's something that really you learn on the job, and it's a very, very specific niche in the computing community. So like I said, I love all our coworkers. I mean, Aaron is great here. Like I said, Carl, Hector, Daniel, everybody are very knowledgeable. So these are some really smart guys, really blessed to work with y'all. It's great working with y'all. You guys are very intelligent, so shout out to y'all. And last but not least, supercomputers are very expensive and vendors want to be paid. So vendors will work with you to solve your security issues. It is crazy what money will do. Money is a heck of a motivator, So it's great working with our vendors. Like I said, we provide them with the money, and you'll be surprised. Like I said, really putting the pressure to get things done because we're on the cutting edge of science. We're being innovative. So, when money is involved, people tend to get to things a little bit faster. Yeah.
Can I speak one on?
Yeah.
One of the other things that I guess I kind of foresaw in the HPC space, rebooting machines is a really big deal.
Oh my God. Yes,
Like,
it is.
you can't imagine it. Like I'm used to coming from like payment processing. Oh, I've got 4 servers. I can reboot one at a time. Or I have 2,000 servers. If I turn any of them off, someone's going to be mad at me.
Yes, that is definitely a really big deal having to reboot a
And
system.
they might be running them, for weeks or months. So, ones that aren't in use can get reboots, and declared maintenance windows, are declared maintenance windows. But the level of from like where I'm able to hide everything behind a load balancer and just turn half of them off and no one cares. I miss that a little bit.
Hardware fails all the time.
Yes, it does.
Things checkpoint all the time, so nothing is truly lost when something, you might have to go back and rerun stuff, a few minutes of stuff, not days, weeks, or months.
Yeah. I agree.
And the type of jobs that are running, like you have to drain a node to do emergency maintenance. Like some of the systems I worked on, it would take like maybe an hour and all the jobs will finish. What? Like if you try to drain a node, are you waiting days for a job to finish, or that's just how?
If we're draining around the maintenance window, we'll kill jobs. And this is my group, so larger policy by the larger systems are run by a different group. If it's around the maintenance window, we'll kill things, or we'll have reservations where people won't be able to schedule. But normally our drain is we wait till the end user job finishes or crashes.
Yeah.
But our scheduler allows us to put these reservations out, and when users submit these jobs, they have to specify a time. And some systems they're allowed to run over, they'll actually take a deprioritization penalty for that if they do so. But for the most part, a user's reserving, they might be reserving a month at a time, but they're saying, I want this month. And at the end of the month, if your job ain't done, the scheduler will kill it for you.
So we had a comment, checkpoint/restart files are an attack vector as well.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yep, and I kind of talk about that on the next slide, yeah.
Fun.
That's a great point. So how do we mitigate risk? And keep in mind, we can never fully eradicate risk at all. All we can do is do our best to mitigate it. So access control. So I've kind of been talking about that a little bit throughout the presentation, where we have users all over the world, and accessing our systems is not trivial. So every user is vetted and they only have access to the login nodes. So though we allow users to run arbitrary code, you're not able to just run your code all day, every day. You're given what's called node allocation hours. So you have to be very careful with your time and what you are allocated. So if you're only given 40 hours of node allocation and your project takes 30 hours to run something, sure, you'll run out of it and you just want to do it 24 hours, you'll run out of it in a day, almost a little bit less than 2 days. But if that's how you want to utilize your time, sure. But that's why you have to really be careful and understand what you're running, how you're running it, and be very cognizant of how you use it. So our users tend to really take that time to be precious and be careful with how they actually run their data. So data sensitivity separation. So we do support open science and we support moderate, not to be confused with classified, but something that has a higher data protection or data sensitivity. So if your data is more sensitive and does not belong in open research, then it sits in its own different enclave, and we have a whole different level of security benchmarks, security things in place that might differ from being an open. And then even if your data is more sensitive and needing to be in moderate, then that sits in its own enclave and it has its own rules. So we have to separate and be really cognizant and pay attention to those different enclaves with the different data separation. User responsibility, like I said, does open research work with CUI? That's not considered open, I think that's considered open research. That is moderate, that's moderate and above. So we do support that, but that's not considered open research.
Controlled unclassified. So
Yeah, controlled and classified information. I forgot what the acronym before that was. They recently changed it.
no, I thought that, yeah, we've got UNCI now, which is
They keep changing the acronyms.
Yeah, would Kung Fu Panda be in?
it was
open research
OUO.
or in-
OUOCUI was the old name for it.
Thank you, yeah. With the,
That would have to be long.
so yeah, that's,
It can't be open. It's gotta be moderate.
yeah, yeah, that's an industry partnership, so yeah, that's considered
Okay, so
moderate.
industry partnership.
Like I said, user responsibility. We rely heavily on the user to know the rules of the user agreement and to be responsible users. So sure, you can use your node allocation hours to try to do something malicious. Sure, if that's what you want to do, you'll be banned and never asked to come back ever again, and you'll be laughed at if you continue to submit project proposals, and you will be denied. And again, like I said, if you do something extremely malicious, like I said, you might even go to jail. So if that's how you want to spend your time and the rest of your life, amen, I don't judge. It's your life to live. However, we will not be supporting you through that. So we put a lot of trust and faith in our users as well. It already takes a lot of time and effort to even get on our systems, and it's precious, and a lot of people fight for it, and it's a highly competitive process. So if people usually are very cognizant with how they use their time, and we put a lot of trust in our users. Yeah.
Who decides whose proposals are accepted?
So our resource utilization council, and then once it goes past that point, they review the proposal to see if your idea, like I said, if it's deemed worthy, so to speak, and if it'll really have a scientific impact or whatever it may be, and it goes through them.
If a user does something more than being banned from the system, you share that with the rest of the labs that this person did bad things on our system. Maybe look out if they try to schedule something on yours.
Is there a blacklist for the?
Yeah.
the labs?
This sounds like a classified.
I mean, we all know the answer. All the labs talk, we all live their lives. Yeah, question.
Yeah, thank you,
It's
Dave.
a small world.
It is a small world.
Yeah.
Phosphate doesn't like you,
Yeah. We still have monitoring tools, so we have our network intrusion detection systems, our host intrusion detection systems, and other SIEM tools. So, but that's still pretty similar to industry, but we also have those as well to monitor our network and to monitor all of our systems. Policy control evaluation, like I mentioned before, we take existing controls, and usually certain controls, like I said, like sticks, they're usually like, trying to think of the word for it, they're like guidelines, so to speak, of what you should be doing. But like I said, they don't necessarily map one to one. And like I said, we even have different controls across different types of nodes. I mean, like I said, compute nodes and DTNs and logins, they might not have the same controls because like I said, with compute, it has a completely different need than the logins. So we definitely have to be very customized when it comes to what controls we even put on logins versus what we do on compute. So it's highly customized. So we have to really pay attention to those types of things. And there are now documents in development to address HPC specific needs. I'm going to shout out Ryan Adamson, who was a part of the NIST document that we have, and that is a link to it there. And I'll share, I guess I can share the slides with everybody, but yeah, shout out to Ryan. He was a part of a NIST for the National Institute of Science and Technology. It's actually like a really big deal to have a document out there like that. So our boss is really great, you know. And also, like I said, working with vendors. So a lot of the times when it comes to security, security is an afterthought. So if you put security at the beginning of your development process, then it severely reduces risk. So when we are included at the forefront of it, that way you're not wasting unnecessary time with having to go back and say, oh, you didn't consider this, and this when you were developing your system. And like I said, that's a waste of time, money, and resources. So by including us in the very beginning, then we're able to give our suggestions, and then we can create as secure of a system as we possibly can.
You mentioned earlier on that you couldn't take a 20% performance hit for security reasons, right?
Yep.
You are using tools and you are putting in some controls.
Correct.
What is an acceptable level of reduction in performance?
We have our own benchmarking to say what is worth it and what isn't. And like I said, I can't necessarily answer that because it depends. It depends on the node type. It depends, like I said, what's acceptable on a compute node might not be acceptable on a login and vice versa. So it depends on what it is. But
One of the things that we tell our end users is that, well, I'm doing Summit specifically because I can't remember what the Frontier says, but Summit reserves the first core, and it's both of its threads, for system processes, and those aren't eligible to the scheduler. And everything that's not a user scheduled job is locked into just those two threads.
Yeah.
Okay, it's like 4 threads, because there's 4 core on these. And so we basically just tell users, assume you have 1 CPU less, and while Scalable, which is kind of my department's, my group's sister department, manages those systems. The whole idea is to more make the performance impact predictable and limited.
correct.
Than it is to give it a specific quantity.
Yeah.
Because I don't care if, say for example, titanium white, the replacement for carbon black or whatever, decides to go and index every FD on the machine if it's doing it on only 1 thread.
Okay, so that kind of sounds like you can trade ops performance for security performance, but you can't trade user performance for security performance.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
And definitely nothing that would just, that would unexpectedly jump in and start eating resources without any.
I guess you could say things tend to fail open. As
We also
opposed to
have
failing
smaller
security.
systems, we run things on to test it out before, we don't just run something carte blanche and fix it.
correct, yeah.
It tested on the smaller systems or to the clusters and then it scales up, so they vary. Those types of issues are identified early before they have, that way we're not wasting time on the bigger systems.
Right.
And if we also make any changes, we also do communicate that as well. We don't just slap it on and then users are like, why is my code running 15% slower? It's like, well, we communicate that. Yes.
So, we're talking about checkpointing earlier. I was just curious, like what counts in checkpointing in this context? Are we talking about like purely like data backups, or are you also like capturing like the state of processes that you started, or is it both?
Said check.
So yeah, so, do you mind me adding?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's up to the end user. Our scheduler, well, the scheduler we use the most, which is Slarman, and CBS can too, has ways for a workload to say, I have made a checkpoint. And for the scheduler to try to resume from a checkpoint, but it's up to the researcher or developer to implement support for that. So generally, it could be simple as coalesce your state, save enough of it on disk to be able to pick up in case something goes bad, and maybe do that every few hours. But there's a trade-off because coalescing state and actually saving that disk has a cost. So there's a balance of how much time you spend checkpointing versus the likelihood of needing to restore from such a checkpoint. And some jobs don't even support checkpointing at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I assume if you're running something for months at a time, you probably want this to check it.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
So on the checkpointing topic, so we had a previous HPC talk, and I forget who gave it, but they were saying just with how low level this is, things would outright fail.
Mhm.
Is that something that is occurring on a daily or weekly basis?
The bigger the cluster is, the more likely there will be. Oh, sorry, I should let you see your talk.
Oh, no, you're fine.
The bigger the cluster is, the more nodes you have, the more likely it'll be key. The guidance I've always heard is your average server has about 99.5% uptime.
Yep.
It's pretty
And
bad.
yeah, and so if you need more, you have to be resilient. We have an industry average. Yeah, so we try to get better than that individual node lifetime, and we try to look for failure characteristics. So if a machine is complaining about something, it is no longer schedulable for new work.
Yeah.
For example, a CMOS battery goes bad, that drops a health check. A fairly automated process will mark that node as no longer eligible for new work. It'll continue whatever work it has done. Or if we start seeing, ECC failures as an indicator of memory failure, we don't have to worry about drive failure because we don't have drives. But at the end of the day, eventually something decides to die, and that's just a fact of life. And we have to understand that. And we have to make sure that we manage the expectations of our end users to say that's just the fact of it. Those numbers at the very beginning for the benchmarks, it's really hard to run a benchmark that uses the entire machine.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always succeed. You don't always get the numbers.
So this is just a slide talking about the internal red team findings of Summit, which again, my boss, Ryan Abson, was a part of. So an audit exposed 10 vulnerabilities that took action to fix to mitigate with IBM, which was our partner in Summit. They were extremely helpful and worked very hard to provide the fixes. And these are 4 interesting publicly disclosed ones. So this is a list of those there. So if you guys want to read up on that, you can. So yeah, a lot of the times we'll have, like I said, internal red teams. And because our systems are so unique, it's probably no way that somebody outside of the HPC environment would even discover this. So having internal red teams are also very important when it comes to our very, very custom machines. Okay, there we go. So yeah, now I'm just going to talk about a few career paths in InfoSec and the different sections of security. So you can think of it as three different buckets. So specifically, our full name of our team is the Cybersecurity and Information Engineering Group. So we have our cybersecurity engineers on one side, and then we have our data focused or our data analytics or data engineers on the other side. So you can either have a defensive focus, you can have a offensive focus, or you can have a data focus. So we have people that are into defense. So that's like security engineering, security architecture, incident handling, digital forensics. Policy development is also another thing that people don't think about as defense, but when we have that different policy that tells us what we can and cannot have on our system, so that is also another form of defense that protects us legally. It is a legal form of defense. So audit and compliance and CISO and risk management. Then you have offensive focus. So you can think of that as penetration testing, red teams, all know, like, so there's the terminology of red teaming and blue teaming and purple teaming for penetration testing, bug bounty programs, exploit development and vulnerability research. And then you can also go into the data side of it, where let's say you're more interested in the data and handling that. You have data engineering, machine learning, security taxonomy, common weaknesses and vulnerability enumeration, or that's CWEs and CVEs, open source intelligence gathering and proactive coordination and response to threats. So, and also none of these paths are mutually exclusive. So you could do a little bit of both or all of them. And you can do a lot. Like personally for me, I'm more of like a software engineer at heart. So I kind of do like secure software engineering development on top of my core responsibilities of being like a technical person and an engineer. And we also do a little bit of research as well when we do our day-to-day tasks. So yeah, you can really do just about all three in your job responsibilities. All right, what's it?
I think he's asking about,
But what
Good
about,
presentation on cyber defense for HPC, but what about other cyber offensive uses of HPC? Looking forward to you coming again for another presentation.
I don't think you'll find that in office science labs.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find it. There we go.
Yeah,
So,
DoD labs for that.
yeah, our specific focus is to support science. Now, you can go to like, yeah, the DoD, that's probably a more proper entity to.
That one
do
sounds like
things
more
like
jail
that.
time.
Fair, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I will also make that known as well. When it comes to penetration testing, let's say you're like, oh, I want to help the community and I want to help penetrate frontier. If you don't have explicit permission to do that, and when I say explicit, I mean explicit. It has to be approved and other people have to know there are at least 3 to 4 different entities that are involved in this. Do not do it.
You don't just have a banning program?
Yeah, that's like, just don't do it. Okay, you have to have explicit permission to do, even amongst us. I mean, we're employees and we have to get explicit permission to do things like that. So don't do it. If you want to help,
Got the cyber ranch thing, right?
yeah,
That's coming out. Or is it, has it already happened this year?
have it. The cyber range, the cyber coming
Okay.
soon. Okay. Yes, but don't try and hack Frontier or Summit or any system at ORNL because the government might find you and you might go to jail. So don't do that. Yes.
So question,
Mhm.
so. I know like this one's relatively common, at least for me, but like, what if you have a client and they say, oh, hey, we inadvertently found this security issue on it? Does that actually happen? Because they were already authorized at that point. They weren't explicitly looking for it.
So responsible disclosure, in
Yes.
that, yeah, in that term, that takes like a different type of assessment, but like that, there is a such thing as responsible disclosure if you find something on accident or it's not something that you were intending to do, so to speak. We'll evaluate it to.
So just don't tell you, so we don't go.
Well, I'm not saying that. Please, like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But I mean, that is, I mean, that's plausible that you do something and you find something, and like I said, we continuously monitor, we have the log, so we'll know if you're doing something and we'll know if you're telling the truth or not. So, I mean, it's, so, and that's the other thing too, when it comes to like our strong identity proofing and all of our logs and everything that we log, not only does that protect us as an entity, but it also protects you. So, if somebody's trying to do something nefarious or they try to say that you specific or your user did something, we'll have the evidence to say, was it really you or was it somebody that got access to your credentials that pretended to be you? So it also protects the person as well. But that's plausible. We don't automatically throw you in jail. Let's just say that. Okay. Responsible disclosure. Responsible disclosure.
So the question, how long do you keep PCAP dead?
I don't think we're answering.
Long enough?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one in the ether.
Somewhere between a nanosecond ago and the end of the universe.
Yeah, that's why I forget.
Hey, I think the lab is hiring if you want to leave WWT.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I said,
Copy that.
if you would like a career transition, like I said, I love the lab. So I mean, my pathway into the lab was, so I got a scholarship called the Scholarship for Service. The government gave me a stipend, paid for my tuition, and in turn, I had to work for the government. So there was a job. I mean, yeah, I just had to sell my soul for the government for money, and it was the best thing I ever did, man. So yeah, so I went to a job fair and made one connection with a person in a totally different directorate and group. I talked to him, and usually when people say, "Oh, I'm gonna pass along your resume," you're like, "No, you're not." Well, he actually did, and he passed it on to my boss, and that's how I got connected to Ryan, and that's how I got here, just by talking to one person. Like I said, they were doing a job that I did not want to do. But I decided to go to the table anyway. To be honest with you, I had no knowledge of Oak Ridge. Like I said, I'm from Mississippi. So I was like, "Ooh, Tennessee. Yeah, that's close to home." So I was like, great. And I had no knowledge on high performance computing whatsoever. Like I said, I've got a computer science and engineering degree. So, very theory heavy, program heavy. And when I came here, they taught me everything that I needed to know. Because like I said, HPC is very niche and it's not something that they necessarily teach. And not every university even has like a HPC center. Mine did, but not every university does. And even then, it's still a huge learning curve once you actually get here. So that's kind of the beauty of the lab, is that they teach you everything that you need to know. You're not expected to know everything because they don't teach it anywhere really. So, and I mean, if they do, I mean, that's great. But when I was coming up, they really weren't teaching that anywhere. So they really teach you everything you need to know. And there's no expectation for you to know everything. We will teach you everything that you need to know. And there's no judgment at all. Like I said, I came in and I was like, I can program. That's about it. And they were like, great, we can work with that. So, I mean, like I said, I've been working here 4 years now. I'm always continually learning. And like I said, there's something, literally, our jobs are not boring. We learn something new every day. You will be surprised, or maybe not, you'll be surprised what users are capable of. And a lot of the times I will look at something and I'll be like, how in the world did you do that? How? But it's finding that how that makes our job very interesting and keeps us on our toes. So, like I said, I love our job, man. It's pretty great. So, like I said, I'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. Performance is a top priority in HPC. Therefore, we cannot take traditional approaches. For users, integrity is more important versus confidentiality. Internal red teams are very effective in finding vulnerabilities in custom HPC software stacks. And finally, we don't sacrifice security, we just find an alternative route. So like I was mentioning before, we have our NIST 853 guidelines. We might not necessarily be able to do it in the way that they suggest. We just find a different way and an alternative path to still meet the nature of the benchmark. So that's what makes our job interesting and fun, is that we have to do things differently that private industry probably wouldn't even have to worry about, or things that they do. So we have to find very unique solutions to our very unique problems. And yeah, that is it. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
It's HPC less. Apparently.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
So, thank you very much, Tori, once again. It's great, wonderful, thank you. So we're here the first Tuesday of every month. I believe we have a speaker we have speakers lined up we have it for November and December?
Yes.
Okay, we got November, December, but we have openings in January.
Thank you, Kayla.